One of the richest imperial machines of the early modern world began with a man who could not keep the city he loved. That is the paradox at the heart of the Mughal story. Not a march from strength to strength. Not an inevitable conquest by a superior civilization. Not the lazy myth of cannons defeating elephants as though technology alone could govern a continent. The empire that would one day command vast harvests, armies, roads, courts, languages, and imaginations across much of the Indian subcontinent began with dispossession. It began with a prince repeatedly broken by the politics of Central Asia. His name was Zahir-ud-din Muhammad Babur. Born in 1483 AD in Fergana, Babur inherited more memory than power. On his father's side, he belonged to the Timurid house, heirs to the prestige of Timur. On his mother's side, he claimed descent from the line of Chinggis Khan. In the political language of the age, this was not ornament. Lineage was a weapon. Blood could summon loyalty, terrify rivals, justify ambition, and transform a vulnerable frontier ruler into a claimant of sacred cities. But pedigree is not a fortress. A name does not feed cavalry. A glorious ancestor does not prevent betrayal. Babur became ruler of Fergana as a child, surrounded by relatives, begs, and rivals who understood that a throne held by youth was an invitation to conspiracy. His imagination fixed on Samarkand, the glittering symbol of Timurid legitimacy. To hold Samarkand was to stand inside the dream of empire. To lose it was to possess a title without gravity. And Babur lost it, more than once. He captured, starved, negotiated, fled, returned, and failed again, until the old Timurid chessboard began to close around him. Prestige drained away, men deserted, resources vanished. The dream of Central Asian supremacy became not a crown, but a wound. Babur lost nearly everything. And that loss made him dangerous. This is Professor Adrian Lockwell for Archives of Humanity, opening the case not as a romance of conquest, but as an investigation into power. How it is imagined, how it is organized, how it survives the men who seize it. The Baburnama, Babur's own extraordinary memoir, does not present a marble statue. It reveals a restless and observant ruler, poetic, violent, self-critical, wounded, hungry for gardens, cities, loyalty, and legitimacy. Later historians have helped expose the larger machinery behind that life. Central Asian displacement, Indian wealth, Afghan factionalism, Persianate statecraft, and the emerging logic of gunpowder war. The central question is not merely how Babur invaded India. The deeper question is how an exiled prince from the margins of Central Asia defeated the Sultan of Delhi at Panipat in 1526 AD, and in doing so laid the first foundations of an Indian gunpowder superpower. The answer begins with three invisible battlefields. First, exile. Exile was Babur's brutal academy. It stripped away the illusions that protect secure rulers. It taught him that loyalty is transactional, that prestige without revenue is theater, and that ambition without logistics becomes self-destruction. Second, organization. Gunpowder mattered, but cannons and matchlocks did not win because they existed. Weapons are inert until command gives them meaning. Babur's genius lay in fusing cavalry mobility, field artillery, defensive carts, disciplined sequencing, and psychological pressure into a single battlefield system. Third, legitimacy. Every empire must win twice. First on the field, then in the minds of those who must obey. Delhi could be taken in a day. Hindustan could not be ruled by announcement. Babur would have to frighten, reward, negotiate, absorb, and endure. So the story does not begin in Delhi. It begins on the shattered Timurid frontier, where a young prince chased Samarkand until Central Asia broke his dream, and where that broken dream began to turn south, toward Kabul, toward Hindustan, and toward the grand collision waiting at Panipat. The map now pulls northward, beyond the Indus and beyond Kabul, into the fractured world that made Babur's southern turn not an adventure, but a strategic necessity. A century after Timur's death in 1405 AD, his name still carried the voltage of empire. It was a title deed written in conquest, memory, and dynastic myth. The Timurids had ruled cities of extraordinary brilliance: Herat, Bokhara, Samarkand. These were not marginal courts. They were centers where poetry, astronomy, theology, architecture, and political violence lived side by side. But prestige is not power. Timur had conquered like a storm. His descendants inherited something far less stable, a family argument with armies attached. The Timurid world had shattered into rival principalities. Each prince possessed enough lineage to claim greatness, but rarely enough force to secure it. Succession was unstable. Territory was negotiable. Loyalty moved with advantage. The great military nobles, the begs, were indispensable but dangerous, because their obedience was often less a moral bond than a calculation. In that world, kinship did not prevent betrayal. It often supplied the legal and emotional language for it. A cousin was not merely a relative. A cousin was a rival with a bloodline, a grievance, and cavalry at his back. Into this arena came Zahir-ud-din Muhammad Babur. In 1494 AD, still a boy, he inherited Fergana, a small and exposed principality in the mountains and valleys of Central Asia. The Baburnama, his remarkable memoir, preserves the atmosphere of those years with unusual candor. Sudden reversals, exhausted marches, uncertain allies, humiliating dependence, and the constant fear that authority might evaporate overnight. Babur was not born into security. He was born into a political chessboard where every square could conceal a trap. Fergana gave him a throne, but not safety. Around him stood ambitious relatives, opportunistic nobles, and neighboring powers waiting for weakness. A child ruler did not simply govern in Central Asia. He survived inspection. Every decision became a test of legitimacy. Could he reward followers? Could he punish defectors? Could he defend fortresses? Could he feed men whose loyalty lasted only as long as profit and hope remained alive? And above all these pressures stood Samarkand. Samarkand was not merely a city. It was the sacred magnet of Timurid ambition. To possess it was to touch the mantle of Timur himself. It meant prestige, inheritance, and the possibility of being more than a provincial survivor. For Babur, Samarkand became beautiful, fatal, and irresistible. He captured it while still young, but Central Asian victory often carried poison inside it. While he strained to hold the great city, Fergana slipped from his grasp. He had won the symbol and lost the base. That was one of history's harsher lessons. A ruler can seize glory and still lose the machinery that makes rule possible. Samarkand could dazzle the imagination, but it could not by itself pay soldiers, secure harvests, or keep wavering begs loyal. Babur would capture and lose the city more than once. Each attempt consumed manpower, alliances, resources, and credibility. The dream of Timurid restoration became a furnace. It hardened him, but it also burned away the foundations beneath him. Then the board changed completely. From the north rose the Uzbeks under Muhammad Shaybani Khan, a ruler of severe discipline and ruthless strategic clarity. Shaybani did not merely enter the old Timurid competition. He ended its assumptions. What had been a contest among rival princes became a foreclosure of Babur's entire world. Uzbek pressure in Transoxiana challenged Timurid claims at the root. Babur was no longer struggling inside a familiar dynastic game. He was watching the game itself pass into the hands of a new power. Here, in Los, the future founder of the Mughal Empire learned the darker curriculum of politics. Loyalty was transactional. Lineage without logistics was ornamental. Cavalry could win raids, but cavalry alone could not hold a state. A ruler without reliable revenue was not truly sovereign. He was living on borrowed time from men who might leave at dawn. There was no destiny guiding Babur toward India. There was pressure. There was failure. There was geography closing around ambition. Central Asia did not give him an empire. It denied him one. And as Samarkand receded from dream into wound, the strategic horizon shifted south. Kabul would become the next square on the board. Not a consolation prize, but the frontier laboratory where a dispossessed prince could rebuild himself into something far more dangerous. Kabul only becomes fully intelligible when placed beside the world to its south. Beyond the mountain corridors lay Hindustan, not as a passive prize, and not as an empty stage awaiting a foreign conqueror, but as one of the great engines of wealth in the early 16th century AD. North India possessed dense agrarian production, populous villages, market towns, older urban centers, and revenue traditions capable of sustaining armies, courts, cavalry, artisans, officials, and sacred institutions on a scale that Central Asian politics could rarely match. This was the first great contrast on the chessboard. Central Asia offered prestige, but India offered revenue. Samarkand could give a Timurid prince a name. The Gangetic Plain could give him the financial oxygen of empire. Yet wealth is not the same as unity. A rich political order can become more vulnerable than a poor one when its elites no longer trust the center. By the time Babur's attention hardened toward the south, the Delhi Sultanate under the Lodi dynasty still possessed real power, but its internal cohesion had begun to fracture. It had inherited the instruments of sovereignty: armies, capitals, provincial offices, taxation networks, and the immense symbolic authority of Delhi itself. But the machinery of rule was being strained by the very men needed to make it function. Ibrahim Lodi, who ruled from 1517 AD to 1526 AD, was not a fool ruling a helpless kingdom. That is the lazy version of history. He commanded manpower, resources, and the inherited prestige of the Sultanate. But rule is never simple possession. Rule is an arrangement with those powerful enough to make obedience conditional. The Afghan nobles who formed a critical part of the Lodi political order did not imagine kingship as silent submission to a distant monarch. Their political culture valued consultation, rank, reciprocal obligation, and the dignity of chiefs who saw themselves as partners in power, not decorative servants of the throne. Ibrahim's centralizing instincts collided with that world. He sought to discipline magnates, reduce aristocratic independence, and make authority flow more directly from the court. To a monarch, this could look like necessary consolidation. To powerful Afghan grandees, it could look like humiliation. Here lies one of the most dangerous patterns in political history. A ruler sees faction as disloyalty. The faction sees centralization as tyranny. Each side claims to defend order. Together, they weaken the state. Across the provinces, ambitious men read the crisis not as a civilizational emergency, but as an opportunity. Dissatisfied Lodis and regional power brokers could look beyond the frontier and see Babur not only as an invader, but as an instrument. A blade borrowed for domestic struggles, aimed at Delhi, and perhaps discarded once its purpose was served. Figures such as Daulat Khan Lodi and other disaffected elites appear in the political traditions of the period as participants in this dangerous game. The precise expectations behind these contacts remain debated, and the sources carry their own agendas. But the strategic pattern is unmistakable. The door to invasion is often opened not by helplessness alone, but by confidence. The fatal confidence of men who believe they can control the force they summon. And Delhi was not the only center of ambition. Rajput power was rising with extraordinary force, especially under Rana Sanga of Mewar. His coalition represented a major military and political challenge, not only to the Lodis, but to any newcomer seeking domination in North India. The Rajput world was not a footnote to Babur's story. It was a competing vision of sovereignty, honor, regional command, and martial legitimacy. One that would soon force Babur to prove that victory at Delhi was not the same as possession of Hindustan. So India before the storm must be understood with precision. It was not militarily backward. It was not asleep. Its armies had their own systems, its elites their own calculations, its fortresses their own stubborn logic. But the political field was crowded and fractured. Wealth stood beside resentment. Manpower stood beside command fracture. Legitimacy stood beside aristocratic anger. Babur did not create these cracks. He studied them. He moved toward a world where multiple powers hoped to use crisis for their own elevation. And once that is understood, the question changes. It is no longer merely why Babur looked south. It is how a smaller army, entering such a crowded arena, could survive the gamble at all. If North India was the prize, Kabul was the instrument that made the gamble possible. Babur took Kabul in 1504 AD not as an emperor arriving at destiny, but as a survivor looking for ground solid enough to stand on. Central Asia had refused to crown him. Samarkand had promised glory, then stripped him of men, money, and illusion. Kabul offered something less radiant than the Timurid dream, but far more useful. A defensible base, a revenue stream, access to manpower, and a position at the hinge of worlds. That position was decisive. Kabul was not merely a refuge behind mountains. It connected Central Asia, Iran, and Hindustan. It was a frontier capital where merchants, soldiers, languages, techniques, and political rumors moved across the same arteries. From the north came the habits of steppe warfare, cavalry speed, sudden maneuver, flanking pressure, and the instinct to defeat mass through movement. From the west came Persianate court culture, administrative refinement, and the language of imperial legitimacy. To the south lay Hindustan, with its immense agrarian wealth, fortified cities, old revenue traditions, war elephants, and a scale of sovereignty Babur could never recreate in Fergana. Kabul gave him something defeat had made precious: time to study. And observation is one of the least romantic, most decisive powers in history. The Baburnama reveals a ruler of unsettling complexity. Self-critical, poetic, violent, observant, and intensely aware of reputation. He noticed landscapes and gardens, but he also noticed weakness, loyalty, supply, morale, and opportunity. He was not merely a dispossessed prince dreaming of a throne. He was a political animal cataloging the world, turning loss into method. The crucial transformation was not that Babur discovered gunpowder as if it were a miracle. It was that Kabul allowed him to integrate older and newer forms of war. He retained the Central Asian cavalry tradition that had given Timurid armies their reach: mobility, mounted discipline, fast operational movement, and the ability to strike where a heavier enemy could not easily respond. But by the time of the Indian campaigns, artillery specialists such as Ustad Ali Tsuli and Mustafa Rumi were associated with his forces, bringing methods shaped by the wider Ottoman-influenced revolution in field warfare. This was not direct Ottoman sponsorship in any simple sense. Influence traveled through experts, experiments, reputations, and the brutal marketplace of war. And here lies the essential point. Technology does not win wars, integrated systems do. A cannon by itself is only metal. A matchlock by itself is slow fire and smoke. Carts without discipline become an obstacle to their own army. Cavalry without coordination becomes aristocratic chaos. Babur's genius was to make these elements reinforce one another. Field guns and matchlocks could shock, disrupt, and unsettle massed formations. Wagon defenses could protect firing positions and channel an enemy advance. Cavalry could exploit the resulting confusion, strike at the flanks, and turn hesitation into collapse. Command discipline stitched the mechanism together. This was not magic. It was architecture. Babur was building an army that could behave like a machine while still preserving the predatory mobility of the steppe. That fusion made him dangerous in a way his enemies did not yet fully understand. They saw a landless prince from beyond the mountains. What stood behind him was a decade of adaptation. Legitimacy borrowed from Timurid memory, tactics sharpened by exile, firepower organized into battlefield rhythm, and ambition hardened into sovereignty. Kabul, then, was more than the place where Babur recovered from failure. It was the laboratory where failure was refined into method. Once that method existed, the question was no longer whether Babur desired Hindustan. The question was which men inside Hindustan would misread him badly enough to open the gate. Babur's military machine did not advance into a vacuum. It entered a political argument already tearing North India apart from within. The road to Panipat was paved less by inevitability than by miscalculation. Hindustan was not a passive prize awaiting conquest. It was a dense arena of sultans, Afghan chiefs, provincial magnates, Rajput powers, dynastic claimants, and frontier brokers, each trying to bend a dangerous crisis toward private advantage. And here history reveals one of its coldest laws. The most dangerous invitations are sent by men who believe they remain in control. At the center of this strained order stood Ibrahim Lodi, Sultan of Delhi from 1517 AD. On paper, his position looked formidable. He possessed the capital, the treasury, the dynastic title, a large army, and the inherited prestige of the Delhi Sultanate. But paper power can be fatally deceptive. Authority does not become real until men obey it under pressure. And Ibrahim ruled an Afghan political world in which power was not simply imposed from the throne. It had to be negotiated among proud nobles who expected rank, consultation, honor, and a share in influence. His centralizing instincts may have appeared, from Delhi, like the restoration of royal strength. To many Afghan chiefs, they looked like humiliation. A ruler who insults the men who make his orders executable is not consolidating the state. He is cutting through the beams that hold the palace above his own head. Among the disaffected stood Dalit Khan Lodi, governor of Punjab, a frontier power broker who understood that distance from Delhi could become political leverage. Alongside him moved figures such as Alam Khan, a Lodi claimant whose ambitions belonged to the same restless world of appeals, rivalries, and factional bargaining. The precise details of these invitations and expectations must be treated carefully. The Baburnama gives Babur's own version, shaped by memory, justification, and royal self-fashioning. Later Persian chronicles carry their own political purposes. Yet the larger pattern is unmistakable. Men inside the Lodi order looked beyond the frontier for help against other men inside the Lodi order. They were not necessarily summoning a permanent Mughal Empire. Many likely imagined a weapon. A Timurid prince could weaken Ibrahim, frighten a rival, secure a governorship, restore a claim, or rebalance the politics of North India. This is the fatal arithmetic of faction. The outsider is invited as an instrument, while every faction assumes that once the immediate enemy is damaged, the instrument can be dismissed. Babur was not that kind of instrument. He came with dynastic prestige older than the Lodi throne, carrying Timurid memory through his father's line and Chinggisid connection through his mother's. He came with a disciplined core army hardened by Central Asian defeat. He came with artillery specialists, mobile cavalry doctrine, and a mind trained by dispossession to seize openings before they vanished. Above all, he did not think like a hired blade. His memoirs reveal a ruler of poetry and violence, nostalgia and calculation, self-criticism and imperial appetite. Such a man could accept an invitation without accepting the boundaries imagined by the inviter. Beyond the Afghan crisis of Delhi stood another force no serious strategist could ignore, Rana Sanga of Mewar. Rajput power under his leadership was not a regional inconvenience. It was a formidable military and political coalition, capable of imagining its own future after Delhi's weakening. His relationship to Babur's invasion remains debated, and no simple story should be forced onto the evidence. But what became certain soon enough was this: Rana Sanga would test whether Babur was merely a raider who had won a battle, or a sovereign who could survive in Hindustan. Thus, the board before Panipat was never a crude division between India and Babur. It was a collision of rival projects. Ibrahim wanted obedience. Afghan nobles wanted status and bargaining power. Claimants wanted restoration. Provincial lords wanted autonomy. Rana Sanga represented a rising Rajput horizon. Babur wanted a throne large enough to redeem a lifetime of loss. Each actor believed the crisis could be managed. Ibrahim trusted numbers and kingship. Rebels trusted intervention. Regional powers trusted opportunity. Babur understood something more dangerous. A broken order does not always rearrange itself. Sometimes it is replaced. So the door opened by calculation, and calculation became catastrophe. At Panipat, political misreading would meet tactical revolution, and a brutal truth would emerge from the field. A crowd is not an army until command turns it into one. By April of 1526 AD, the political invitation had turned into a military catastrophe. The elites who believed Babur could be used as a temporary weapon had misunderstood the weapon itself. He did not approach Delhi as a wandering raider content with tribute and retreat. He arrived with a system. On April 21, 1526 AD, near Panipat, north of Delhi, Ibrahim Lodi brought the weight of the Delhi Sultanate against him. Traditional accounts describe Ibrahim's army as vast, supported by war elephants, infantry, and cavalry in numbers that modern historians treat with caution, because pre-modern estimates often served prestige as much as measurement. But the imbalance was real. Ibrahim possessed scale. Babur possessed architecture. That distinction is the key to Panipat. Babur's own memoir, the Baburnama, presents the campaign as a test of nerve, discipline, and arrangement. His army was smaller, far from Kabul, and operating in a hostile political landscape where one defeat could mean annihilation. In crude arithmetic, Ibrahim should have crushed him. But battlefields do not reward arithmetic alone. They reward cohesion, timing, morale, and the ability of command to make many parts behave like a single instrument. Babur adapted methods associated with Ottoman-influenced gunpowder warfare, not as ceremony, but as battlefield grammar. Carts were arranged and tied together to form a defensive barrier, a wagon laager broken by prepared openings. These gaps were not weaknesses. They were controlled doors. Behind and between the carts, artillery and matchlock men could operate with protection, while cavalry waited for the moment to strike through the channels Babur had created. The purpose was not simply defense. The purpose was to control space, tempo, and fear. Ibrahim's army had to advance into that design. Its mass, which should have been its strength, became a problem of movement. The forward pressure of men and elephants met cannon fire, matchlocks, noise, obstruction, and uncertainty. War elephants could be devastating when morale and momentum favored them, but under shock and disorder, their terror could turn inward. Gunpowder did not magically defeat elephants. Technology never wins by itself, but placed correctly, fired under discipline, and embedded inside a larger tactical system, it could fracture the emotional mathematics of a charge. Then came the second half of Babur's design, mobility. His cavalry used Toluma-style flanking maneuvers, the steppe inheritance of encirclement and pressure, now paired with fixed defensive firepower. This was the deeper brilliance of Panipat. Babur did not abandon the old world for the new. He braided them together. Central Asian maneuver met early modern artillery practice. Ibrahim faced not a line, but a machine with hinges. Here lies the sharp thesis of Panipat. A crowd is not an army until command turns it into one. Ibrahim Lodi possessed men, elephants, dynastic status, and the memory of the Delhi Sultanate. What he lacked at the decisive moment was an integrated command structure capable of converting superiority into controlled violence. His political isolation had weakened him before the first cannon fired. An army reflects the court that produces it. Where trust fractures above, coordination suffers below. Babur's smaller force, by contrast, had been hardened by exile. Its men had crossed mountains, endured uncertainty, and accepted a commander whose survival depended on clarity. Ibrahim's army moved beneath the burden of expectation. Babur's moved beneath the pressure of necessity. That difference mattered, because necessity can create a discipline that prestige only pretends to possess. By the end of the battle, Ibrahim Lodi was dead. With him fell not merely a ruler, but the central symbol of Lodi authority. Delhi and Agra passed into Babur's hands, along with treasury, prestige, and the dangerous illusion that victory had settled the question. Panipat was not the simple triumph of firearms over bravery, nor of foreign genius over Indian weakness. It was command architecture defeating a larger but less integrated force. It was the moment when gunpowder, cavalry, discipline, and political fracture converged with lethal precision. But a throne taken in a day can be lost in a season. Panipat killed a sultan and opened Delhi. It did not yet make Babur sovereign in the deeper sense. Beyond Panipat stood a harder test, whether the conqueror could survive the warriors of Rajasthan, and whether victory could become the right to remain. The death of Ibrahim Lodi did not settle North India. It only changed the shape of the crisis. Panipat had given Babur Delhi and Agra, the glittering grammar of sovereignty. But symbols do not collect revenue. Palaces do not command villages. A throne seized in battle must still convince soldiers, nobles, merchants, and rivals that resistance is more dangerous than obedience. That question moved toward its second and more profound test in 1527 AD at Kanwa. The challenger was Rana Sanga of Mewar, one of the most formidable Rajput rulers of the age. He was not a peripheral warrior obstructing an inevitable empire. He was a political architect in his own right, a ruler whose authority had been built through conquest, alliance, reputation, and the hard currency of martial honor. Around him gathered a Rajput coalition powerful enough to contest the future of North India. Strategically, Rana Sanga represented a second center of gravity. Babur had broken the Afghan Sultan in Delhi. Now he faced a rising Rajput power with its own aristocracy, its own legitimacy, and its own vision of supremacy. Kanwa must be understood carefully. It was not a simple civilizational fable, and it was not a battle between destiny and backwardness. It was a contest over sovereignty. Babur, the Timurid exile now holding the old capitals, needed to prove that he was not merely a raider passing through Hindustan's wealth. Rana Sanga could not allow a foreign conqueror to settle easily into the political heart of the subcontinent. Panipat had killed a sultan. Kanwa would decide whether a new order could survive its first great challenge. Inside Babur's own camp, the danger was psychological as much as military. Many of his followers had not marched from Kabul to become permanent servants of an Indian empire. They expected plunder, honor, perhaps a return to familiar lands and older loyalties. Hindustan seemed vast, difficult to hold, and full of enemies. A conquering army can win a battlefield and still lose the will to remain. Babur recognized the danger. The Baburnama reveals a ruler intensely alert to morale, fear, loyalty, food, terrain, and reputation. Before Kanwa, he reached for one of the oldest instruments of command, the conversion of war into meaning. He framed the struggle in religious and ideological language, not as detached ornament, but as political mobilization. That rhetoric must be read historically, as a mechanism of cohesion and legitimacy in a moment of extreme risk. Babur needed his men to believe they were not merely trapped in a hostile land. They were bound to a cause larger than survival. His reported renunciation of wine belonged to the same theater of authority. Babur had cherished wine, poetry, gardens, conversation, and the cultivated pleasures of the Timurid world. To publicly abandon drink before the campaign was therefore not a minor private vow. It was a moral political signal. A commander was cutting away indulgence in order to demand discipline. In the anatomy of power, example can bind men more tightly than orders. On the field, Babur returned to the logic that had destroyed Ibrahim Lodi. Integration, defensive arrangements, firearms, artillery, disciplined timing, and mobile cavalry were not separate tricks. They were components of a single battlefield system. Against the Rajput coalition's offensive power and prestige, Babur tried to control momentum itself, fixing the advance, breaking rhythm, and using cavalry maneuver to turn pressure into vulnerability. Rana Sanga's forces fought for more than territory. They fought for rank, honor, and the possibility of shaping North India's future. But Babur's system held. Kanwa ended in Mughal victory, and the most immediate Rajput challenge to his survival was broken. Delhi and Agra were no longer isolated trophies taken from a dead sultan. They became the center of a claim that had endured a second collision. Kanwa was where conquest attempted to become permanence. The second battle was not for Delhi. It was for the right to stay. Yet victory still did not create an empire by itself. Chundari and Gagra remained ahead, and beyond them waited the deeper enemy of every conqueror. The problem of turning fear, tribute, and battlefield success into institutions strong enough to outlive the man who won them. Kanwa had answered the urgent question of survival. Babur was no longer merely the foreign claimant who had killed a sultan at Panipat. He had faced the great Rajput coalition and remained standing. But history is often cruelest after victory, because victory tempts rulers to mistake battlefield silence for political obedience. In 1528 AD, Babur moved against Chundari, a stronghold associated with Medini Rai and the wider Rajput resistance that had gathered around Rana Sanga's challenge. Chunderi was not simply another fortress on a map. It represented the stubborn reality of North India. Delhi could fall, a sultan could die, a coalition could be broken, and still the land remained full of armed houses, inherited loyalties, regional ambitions, and men whose honor depended on resistance. To break Chunderi was to push back another center of defiance. It weakened the Rajput political-military front and announced that Babur's victories were not isolated accidents. Yet Chunderi also revealed the deeper problem. Babur could defeat fortresses. He could scatter coalitions. He could read terrain, morale, and opportunity with the sharp eye preserved in the Baburnama. But conquest is not the same as absorption. Armies enter cities faster than institutions enter villages. Treasuries can be seized in a week. Revenue must be measured, collected, recorded, redistributed, and protected every season. Sovereignty is not a moment. It is a habit imposed upon time. Then came Gagra in 1529 AD, the campaign that turned Babur's attention toward Afghan and Eastern resistance. This was the ghost of the Lodi order refusing to die. Ibrahim Lodi had fallen at Panipat, but Afghan power had not vanished with his body. Afghan chiefs, displaced commanders, local strongmen, and political claimants still possessed networks, arms, memory, and reasons to wait for the Mughal grip to loosen. The old regime had been decapitated, not dissolved. Gagra matters because it exposes the false simplicity of conquest narratives. The fall of Delhi did not erase every allegiance tied to Delhi. The defeat of one sovereign did not dissolve the bargains, privileges, and expectations that had sustained Afghan influence across the region. Babur was not merely fighting armies. He was fighting memory, legitimacy, and the political instinct of men who believed the new order might still be temporary. By the end of these campaigns, Babur's position was undeniably stronger. Panipat had given him Delhi and Agra. Kanwa had secured his right to remain against a formidable Rajput challenge. Chunderi and Gagra extended the arc of consolidation. On paper, the exiled prince had become master of a vast prize. But the paper was thin. The Mughal state, at this stage, remained a conquest regime with shallow roots. Its power rested heavily on Babur's personal authority, his military prestige, his charisma among followers hardened by exile, and the immediate fear generated by recent victories. That was formidable. It was not yet durable. The machinery that would later make the Mughal Empire one of the great powers of the early modern world. Stable revenue systems, ranked service elites, broad incorporation of regional aristocracies, dependable succession and routine obedience, had not yet fully formed. And then, in 1530 AD, Babur died. The timing was merciless. The founder had won the throne, but he had not lived long enough to turn conquest into architecture. He left Humayun an inheritance glittering with prestige and riddled with danger. Territories not fully integrated, nobles whose loyalty required constant negotiation, Afghan resistance still capable of revival, and brothers with claims, armies, and ambitions of their own. In dynastic politics, blood does not automatically create unity. Sometimes it multiplies the number of men who believe they deserve the same crown. This is the old strategic trap of empire. A founder can conquer through speed, audacity, and violence. A successor must govern through routine. The battlefield rewards the decisive hour. The state rewards repetition. Taxation, law, appointments, intelligence, discipline, and the constant conversion of local interest into imperial service. So the question changed. It was no longer whether Babur could defeat the armies before him. He had proven that. The question was whether his dynasty could survive without him. Babur conquered a throne. Humayun had to prove it was an empire. Then came the oldest test of monarchy. The founder dies, and the throne asks whether charisma can be inherited. In 1530 AD, Babur left Humayun not a settled empire, but a dangerous proposition. Delhi and Agra had been taken. The great rivals had been beaten. Yet beneath those victories, the Mughal position remained thin, like a blade balanced on a fingertip. Provinces had not yet been knitted into a dependable administrative order. Afghan chiefs still remembered the Lodi world. Regional powers watched for weakness. And inside the Timurid household itself, ambition did not sleep. Humayun was not a fool. That caricature is too easy, and history is rarely that merciful. He was intelligent, cultivated, and capable of endurance. But he inherited a realm before it had acquired the habits of obedience. His brothers were not merely relatives. They were rival centers of gravity. In Timurid political culture, princes often treated territory as patrimony to be divided, bargained over, and defended. What Babur had held together through personality, victory, and momentum, Humayun now had to hold through institutions that scarcely existed. Into that opening stepped one of the most formidable rulers of the 16th century, Sher Khan, later Sher Shah Suri. He was not a background obstacle in the Mughal story. He was the Afghan counter-argument to Mughal destiny. Rising in eastern India, especially within the political worlds of Bihar and Bengal, Sher Khan understood a principle Humayun's fragile court had not yet mastered. Sovereignty is not announced by lineage, it is proven by discipline. The collision came in stages, and each stage stripped away a Mughal illusion. At Chausa in 1539 AD, Humayun suffered a devastating defeat. The heir of Panipat and Kanwa, the son of the man who had broken Delhi's sultan, suddenly discovered that inherited glory could not command loyalty, logistics, or timing. Then, in 1540 AD at Kannauj, also remembered as Bilgram, disaster hardened into strategic fact. Humayun was defeated again. North India slipped from Mughal hands. The dynasty that would one day appear immovable was pushed off the board. This rupture must remain at the center of the story. The Mughal Empire was not inevitable. It did not rise in a clean line from Babur to Akbar. It was interrupted, humiliated, almost erased. For years, the House of Babur survived less as an empire than as a memory carried by fugitives. Sher Shah, meanwhile, demonstrated the terrifying power of administrative competence. His regime was brief, but its statecraft was sharp. Roads were strengthened and secured, turning movement itself into an instrument of rule. Postal and intelligence networks improved the speed at which information traveled. Currency reform, associated with the silver rupiah, gave commerce and taxation a more reliable medium. Revenue assessment became more systematic. Military administration became tighter. Sher Shah did not merely defeat Humayun. He exposed the difference between conquering territory and governing it. Later Mughal systems should not be lazily described as copies of Sher Shah's order. History is more intricate than imitation. But the Suri interlude mattered. It provided a precedent, a warning, and in some areas a practical foundation upon which later Mughal rulers would build, refine, or answer. Sher Shah was the rival who taught the Mughals what their empire lacked. Humayun's exile carried him westward into the Safavid sphere of Iran, where survival required negotiation, dependency, and humility. Safavid support helped him eventually return, but that support came wrapped in Persianate courtly influence, diplomatic obligation, and lessons in imperial style. Exile transformed the dynasty again. Babur's exile had produced a conqueror. Humayun's exile produced a restored house with a deeper awareness of vulnerability. In 1555 AD, Humayun recovered Delhi. In 1556 AD, he died, leaving behind a throne restored but still precarious. And upon that uncertain inheritance stood a boy named Akbar, who would face the question that had haunted the dynasty from the beginning: how to turn conquest, exile, and recovery into a state that could endure. Humayun's restoration in 1555 AD solved only the most immediate crisis. The Mughals were back in North India. But return was not the same as rule. The dynasty still faced the question that had haunted it since Babur crossed into Hindustan. Could conquest be made to reproduce itself? Could a battlefield victory become taxable, recordable, enforceable, and inheritable? The answer came from a child of displacement. Akbar was born in 1542 AD, while Humayun's fortunes were broken and the Mughal future seemed almost fictional. His earliest inheritance was not security, but movement, dependency, and the memory of a throne nearly lost. When Humayun died in 1556 AD, power passed to a teenager whose empire was still more claim than structure. Almost immediately, the restored Mughal position was threatened by Humayun, the formidable general and administrator who rose from the ruins of Suri authority and seized Delhi. At the Second Battle of Panipat in 1556 AD, Bairam Khan, acting as regent, led Mughal forces to victory. The battle preserved Akbar's throne. It did not yet create an empire. Akbar's significance lies in what followed. He gradually emerged from regency and began the long conversion of military possession into imperial order. His genius was not moral perfection, and not simple tolerance elevated into legend. It was institutional imagination. He understood what many conquerors never do. A throne won by cavalry must be defended by clerks, accountants, marriage brokers, engineers, informants, commanders, and provincial collaborators. Gunpowder opened the gates, but paperwork held the empire. The institutional heart of this transformation was the Mansabdari system, a hierarchy of imperial service that ranked nobles by status and military obligation. A servant of the emperor was not merely honored. He was measured. Rank shaped pay, prestige, and the cavalry expected in service. Jaggir assignments, revenues drawn from designated territories, financed these obligations, while the crown worked to prevent office from hardening into independent hereditary power. Authority circulated. Ambition was not destroyed. It was redirected toward the imperial center. This was the hidden machinery of Mughal greatness. Horses could be branded. Troops could be inspected. Obligations could be recorded. Noble rivalry, always dangerous, was pulled into a system where advancement depended on proximity to the emperor. Abu al-Fazl, in the Akbarnama and the Ain-i-Akbari, described this order as if it radiated harmoniously from Akbar's person. The reality was rougher. Bargaining, corruption, evasion, faction, and local resistance never disappeared. Yet the achievement remains immense. Akbar built a political structure strong enough to make competing elites serve the same expanding machine. Revenue made that machine breathe. Reforms associated with Raja Todarmal and the ZAP system sought to standardize assessment in core regions, measuring cultivation, estimating yields, calculating averages, and translating harvests into cash obligations. This was not romantic statecraft. It was the arithmetic beneath imperial splendor. Cannons required metal, powder, transport, gunners, and pay. Fortresses required engineers. Cavalry required horses and inspection. Campaigns required roads, intelligence, and supply. The peasant's field, the accountant's ledger, and the artillery park were not separate worlds. They were organs of one state. Akbar also recognized that domination alone was too expensive. Incorporation could be deeper than coercion. Rajput houses, once among the most formidable obstacles to Mughal survival, were drawn into the imperial order through marriage alliances, mansabs, negotiated honor, and high command. This was not sentimental friendship. It was a grand bargain. Former enemies received rank, dignity, and a place inside the ruling architecture. The emperor received soldiers, legitimacy, and regional roots. Around this structure grew a court culture of rare ambition. Translation projects, debates, ceremonies of sovereignty, and policies of accommodation that widened the ideological space in which diverse elites could serve one crown. Akbar was solving the oldest imperial problem: how to govern difference without allowing difference to become rebellion. The results appeared across the map. Gujarat, Bengal, Rajasthan, Kabul, Kashmir, Sindh, and the Deccan frontier all felt the pressure of a state whose reach had become operational, not episodic. This was the Mughal gunpowder superpower in mature form: artillery, yes, but also revenue schedules, cavalry quotas, roads, records, provincial bargains, and the relentless conversion of wealth into organized force. Babur had brought the weaponized hunger of exile. Akbar gave that hunger a skeleton. And with the machine now built, the story widens beyond one dynasty, toward the deeper anatomy of power itself. After Akbar's achievement, the story can no longer be confined to battles, dynasties, or court ceremonies. It widens into something more unsettling: the anatomy of power itself. The rise of the Mughals was never a simple tale of a foreign adventurer, a fortunate canon, and a fallen sultan. That version is too small because it mistakes the instrument for the transformation. The deeper pattern is harsher. Failure, when it does not destroy ambition, can refine it into a colder intelligence, can strip away vanity. It can teach a ruler to see power not as inheritance, but as construction. Babur's true education was not victory, it was dispossession. Fergana taught him that birthright could be fragile. Samarkand taught him that prestige without resources was a beautiful trap. The Uzbek advance taught him that history does not pause out of respect for old names. By the time Babur turned toward Hindustan, he had lost the most comforting illusion a prince can possess: that legitimacy alone can protect a throne. That was why exile made him dangerous. It forced him to assemble power from fragments: Central Asian cavalry traditions, Persianate courtly culture, frontier discipline, artillery methods associated with the wider Ottoman world, and the fierce loyalty of men whose fortunes were tied to his survival. Babur did not enter North India as a secure monarch expanding from abundance. He entered as a defeated claimant who had learned to convert scarcity into method. Ibrahim Lodi revealed the opposite danger. He possessed numbers, elephants, territory, and Delhi's symbolic weight, yet his authority had been hollowed by alienated Afghan nobles and restless regional elites. Panipat was therefore not merely the fall of a sultan. It was a warning written across the battlefield. A ruler can command armies on paper while losing the political consent that makes armies obey in practice. Power is not the throne alone. Power is the web of obligation, reward, fear, honor, and calculation that makes the throne real. Rana Sanga's challenge exposed another truth. Conquest does not explain itself. Panipat opened Delhi, but Kanwa asked the harder question: why should this new order have the right to remain? Every regime born from violence must eventually face that interrogation. Babur answered with discipline, ideology, tactical organization, and the brutal confidence of survival. Yet even that answer remained incomplete. Humayun proved how quickly triumph can become inheritance without foundation. A dynasty can receive victories and still lose the world if succession, administration, and loyalty remain unresolved. His exile after the Afghan counterstroke exposed the unfinished architecture beneath Babur's conquest. Sher Shah Suri's success made the lesson unmistakable. Roads, revenue assessment, currency, intelligence, and disciplined provincial control could be as decisive as cavalry or cannon. Akbar supplied the missing structure. His genius lay not only in winning battles, but in incorporation. Former enemies were given rank. Local rulers were offered honor inside the imperial order. Revenue became more predictable. Military obligation became measurable. Diversity was governed not only by force, but by negotiated belonging. The empire endured when ambition was taught to serve the center. This was the grammar shared by the great gunpowder empires: Ottoman, Safavid, Mughal. Cannons could break walls, but institutions held provinces. Firearms could frighten a battle line, but they could not settle succession, reconcile elites, collect harvests, or turn local society into imperial revenue. The echo reaches beyond the 16th century AD. States, armies, corporations, and movements still confuse tools with power. They acquire technologies, platforms, slogans, and weapons, then mistake possession for strength. History is pitiless toward that confusion. The machine matters only when discipline, legitimacy, finance, and human loyalty are built around it. The Mughal rise leaves a colder lesson than triumph. The tools change, the uniforms change, the language of legitimacy changes, but the mechanics of power remain stubbornly recognizable. Exile can sharpen ambition, victory can conceal weakness, and no order survives unless former rivals come to believe that their future is safer inside the system than outside it. And so the narrative returns to the prince who lost the city of his dreams, only to found an empire in a land his failures had taught him how to understand. The circle closes where the paradox began, with Zahir-ud-din Muhammad Babur, a prince who lost the city he believed history owed him, and found instead a different destiny in Hindustan. He wanted Samarkand, not merely as a city, not merely as a prize, but as the living emblem of Timurid legitimacy. Samarkand was memory turned into stone, ancestry turned into geography, ambition turned into a throne. Yet it rejected him again and again. Fergana had given him rule before it gave him security. Central Asia gave him allies who could vanish, victories that could rot overnight, and the brutal education of a world where prestige without resources was only decorated weakness. Kabul, taken in 1504 AD, became the hinge of the story. It was not the end of exile. It was the workshop where exile became method. From that frontier base, Babur learned to combine what broken men often learn faster than comfortable men: movement, improvisation, calculation, and the willingness to build power from fragments. Then came Panipat in 1526 AD. Ibrahim Lodi brought mass, elephants, dynastic authority, and the old confidence of Delhi. Babur brought a smaller army arranged as an integrated system: carts, artillery, matchlocks, cavalry maneuver, discipline, and command. Panipat did not prove that courage had become obsolete. It proved that courage without coordination can be consumed by a machine. Then came Kanwa in 1527 AD. Rana Sanga and the Rajput coalition forced the deeper question. Panipat had killed a sultan. Kanwa asked whether Babur was merely a raider standing in conquered space, or a sovereign capable of making men believe that remaining in Hindustan was worth blood, fear, and future. Chundari in 1528 AD and Gagra in 1529 AD widened the opening. But Babur died in 1530 AD before conquest had hardened into architecture. So the final verdict cannot be simple. Babur founded a possibility. He did not complete an empire. Humayun's defeats after 1540 AD exposed the weakness beneath the inheritance. The dynasty lost North India, went back into exile, and discovered that a throne won by brilliance could still be lost by fragility. Humayun's restoration in 1555 AD recovered the seat of power. But after 1556 AD, Akbar transformed that recovered throne into a durable imperial order. That is why the Mughal Empire became a gunpowder superpower across generations, not in a single burst of cannon fire. Gunpowder opened gates. Administration held provinces. Cavalry won fields. Revenue paid armies. Dynastic charisma gathered followers. Elite incorporation turned former enemies into stakeholders. Rajput alliances, Mansabdari ranks, Jagier assignments, revenue assessment, forts, roads, records, diplomacy, and political imagination became the quieter weapons of imperial survival. The cannon announced power. The ledger made it durable. And this is the deeper law beneath the story. History is rarely built only by the secure. It is often altered by those expelled from one order and forced to master another. Displacement can destroy ambition, but it can also refine it into something colder, more flexible, more dangerous, and sometimes more enduring. Babur lost Samarkand. His descendants gained Hindustan. Between those two facts lies one of history's oldest truths. Power is often born not from possession, but from displacement. For more journeys through the archives of power, empire, and human ambition, subscribe to Archives of Humanity for rigorous historical strategy told across the grand chessboard of time. Select the video on the end screen to continue the investigation. And in the comments, answer with one choice. What mattered more to Mughal survival, guns or institutions?